Hello and welcome back to Medical Compliance with Clarissa. I'm Clarissa Benfield, our Global Director and Business Line Leader for our Medical and Laboratory business at Intertek. And today I'm thrilled to be joined by Christine Forcier. Hi, Christine. How are you?
Hi, very good, Clarissa. How are you doing?
Wonderful. And so happy to have you back as a repeat podcast guest. Really exciting to have you here. So for a refresher for people who maybe didn't see our last podcast, maybe you can just give everybody an introduction to yourself and how long you've been in the medical industry.
Yes, I'm the Global Program Manager for medical devices for the Business Assurance business line. And I've been with Intertek for many years now, 33 years, in medical for the last 25 years.
Yeah, so wonderful. So a lot of experience, a lot of work with different levels of manufacturers. So very excited to chat with you today. So the topic of our discussion today, which is something that has, really become a buzzword in the industry, something we've been talking a lot about is IMDRF. So for those who maybe don't know about IMDRF or who haven't heard of IMDRF before, could you give some insights into what does IMDRF actually stand for? What are the objectives of the group? How long has this group been around? Just kind of an overall introduction.
Right. So IMDRF stands for International Medical Device Regulators Forum. So it's a group of voluntary regulators who came together in October 2011, already 13 years ago, to accelerate the harmonization and convergence of medical device regulatory systems.
Yeah, and it's a really exciting thing to see. I think, overall, as we've seen, medical devices get more complex and regulations get more complex. And, this idea of taking medical devices globally and all manufacturers, right, wanting to reach as many patients as they can and provide access to healthcare, right, as broadly and as widely as they can. This idea of a group that's solely dedicated to, hey, how can we make this easier, more harmonized, allow people to understand exactly what they need to be doing. It's just such a powerful group. And every time you go, it's just, there's a lot of meetings, of course, and a lot of sharing of ideas and what's going on. But every time you go, it just gets more and more exciting and more positive to see, oh, more people are joining, more people are active, oh, more people are wanting to contribute. So I think that kind of evolution over the last, 10 plus years has been really tremendous to see.
Absolutely. I mean, you and I attended the last one together in September, and I was blown away to see how many members there are now. I mean, they started with 8 regulators, literally founding the IMDRF, and now they're up to 42 members. So not all full members. There's affiliates and observers, of course, but 42, they now call a family, if you remember that session. So it's really a community that's grown, and it's helping the IMDRF achieve their goal of, convergence, really by producing governance documents, technical documents, developing training for implementation, and also meeting, like you said, face-to-face twice a year. They have teleconferences. So, I mean, that's how they do their work and create the environment for convergence.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting too, as you say, right now being up to over 40 countries. So we're not just talking about the main players, the main regulators, right? We're talking about smaller countries getting involved, as you say, affiliate members, right? It's not just this idea that, it's all US FDA, it's all the notified body, right? There's participation from around the world, which has just been really exciting to see. So you talked a little bit about how they're working to facilitate this cooperation among the industry and, what they're doing to promote harmonization. But are there specific things, like if someone is interested in understanding, right, exactly what they're doing to promote convergence, like how would I, as an average manufacturer, be aware of what IMDRF is doing or how they're working on harmonization and convergence or what they're focused on?
Well, attending the meetings is one thing, but they have a very good website that's transparent. Like a lot of their documents, everything they're working on is accessible on their website. So they have working groups, so you can see what they're working on at the moment. Some of the key things, of course, everyone has their own interests, but the adverse events terminology, is really helping regulators work together on post-market, signals, and making sure that they're talking the same language, that, when they look at incidents, they know that they can trust the data. So that's really important work they're doing at the moment. Of course, AI, clinical, something really exciting they're working on is product submission. So harmonizing, the content of regulatory submission, so you can see how that can go a long way for convergence. Of course, software, personalized devices, and then you can also see what they've done. So closed working groups, you have access to what they've achieved. Oops, I should hide this. So far, what they worked on previously, and one of the first pieces of work, and I would say a very, very important and critical piece of work was producing the medical device single audit program, the MDSAP. So that was a output of a IMDRF working group. But
I don't know if everybody knows that, right? I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Right. So you can click on this, and of course, we don't have time now to go into all the details, but also you can look at the documents, right, that they produce, and so you have technical documents, procedural documents, information, their meeting outcomes, and we tend to forget that the IMDRF was created in 2011, but before that, these regulators worked together for 20 years, producing, harmonized documents that they could use for regulatory convergence. So you could see like all the work that the GHTF did that is used, and that the IMDRF is still building on. So really good website. I recommend looking at that to get information.
Yeah, certainly. Definitely looking at the different working groups is very beneficial, right? Understanding, what's going on in the industry and where they see, the need for harmonization, right? Where they see the need for working together. Of course, I think it's super interesting to see all of the ones related to software, cyber, AI, right? Everything we know that is coming that's kind of agnostic over many different types of medical devices and technologies. And, what are we doing as an industry? How are we viewing this? How are we regulating this, right? How are we testing these to make sure that we can get them out safely and quickly? And so I think, being able to bookmark that website, utilize it, look at all of the different working groups, the references to all of the past meeting notes is really helpful too. You can see, what different countries have presented, right? What they have said about what they're working on within their own country, things that they've started to adopt. And so if you can't attend the meetings in person, obviously it's really helpful to be able to then either listen in virtually. Of course, they will allow that in a lot of instances, and or reviewing the after statements, right? So what's going on and what's being discussed at these groups. And maybe we can talk to a little bit about how the chairing of IMDRF works. Obviously, we had the FDA that was chairing this year, and then there's some changes in the upcoming year. So for those who don't know, maybe you can share who's going to be chairing next year and kind of how they view that.
Right, so it's rotating, right? So next year will be Japan. So the meetings will happen in Japan. So the committee has really detailed, procedures, and it's again all available on their website, and even how to become a member. So countries have to apply, right, to become an affiliate or an observer, and they have to commit. They have to show what they can contribute, if they would be able to chair, things like this. How committed they are to implementing harmonized technical documents. It's really interesting, even just looking at the application forms, for the different roles. It's very structured.
Yeah. And it was, again, really exciting to have the US chairing this year, and then super excited, of course, for next year with Japan. Obviously, as we know, Japan is a huge booming medical market, right? There's so much development that's happening there. So it's really exciting that, going into 2025, they'll be taking over, and we'll be spending time over there learning more from the Japanese regulators. So, when you think about some of these events and who's attending, we're talking everyone from people like us, of course, who go, to manufacturers, regulatory professionals, right? You kind of get the whole mix with the regulators, as well as, people like us, and then people who are, of course, are active as on the manufacturing side. Yeah. Really interesting. So the other thing that I wanted to touch on a little bit was this idea of reliance. I think, some people have heard this word tossed around a lot, right? It's mentioned a lot. And I think there's some confusion on what reliance actually means. And then in the true application of reliance, like, can you give some additional context to that as well? Because I think, again, it's become a little bit of a buzzword and people are talking about this idea of reliance, but maybe you can share a little bit more.
Right. So reliance, actually, there's different definitions, but in the medical sector, we're using the WHO definition, and they have, a guidance document on the principle of reliance. So it's basically for a regulator to use the work of another trusted regulator to better utilize their own resources, to, focus on what other regulators can do. So, enforcement in country, vigilance and things like this. So regulators who use reliance are still making their own decisions. So it's not like they're delegating anything to others, but they're just really using the work of other regulators. And how MDRF is helping, making this principle alive or, implemented is by creating this trust between regulators. So the IMDRF, with their meetings and their communication and exchanges, they build trust between the regulators so they can more easily actually apply reliance principles because they know who to trust. Right? So now that you have 42 regulators in the family, you can see our reliance is increasing around the world. And there are many examples. I mean, I don't know them all, but I know, Singapore, for example, they'll accept MDSAP audit reports instead of doing an on-site audit or inspection. So that's an example. Hong Kong is doing the same thing, similar. Many regulators, actually. It's not rare. If you look at new regulatory systems that are developing, you will read what they're thinking, what they're planning on. And then MDSAP always comes up. Okay, if a company is certified under the MDSAP program, it's a shorter route, they can skip the audit. So it's really amazing what it will do for accessibility of devices, like you mentioned earlier, right? Equity around the world, like access to devices, and, in countries that have maybe less, a newer regulatory system, but also it's helping regulators build their capacity. So they're learning from the more experienced regulators around the world.
Yeah. And I think this idea of the family, right, and trust and being able to have this trust within the other regulators. And as you say, right, this idea of health equity, which is huge, right? And something that, the whole industry is really pushing towards, which is, everyone should have access. It should be equitable to be able to access these products, and just knowing that it's, it's never going to be an easy path, right? I mean, we are talking medical devices and we are talking regulations, but to make it a smoother path, a clearer path to get to some of these countries that maybe wouldn't be getting these products in the first place. Now there's, an easier path for that. So I think it's exciting to see that. Before we go to, do we have any thoughts on, anything that's coming up with IMDRF, anything in the future that we have known or that they've made public so far?
Well, they're still at the end of they had this strategic plan, like 2020, I think it's 2021 to 2025. They're at the end of that, right? And they were focusing on, challenges with innovative devices. So you can see why they're working on, software, AI, personalized devices. And their other objective was also post-market, strengthen the, post-market phase. So now, I'm curious. I want to see their strategic plan for next year. So it should be coming up soon. But they're still finishing the work on, these priorities they established 5 years ago.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think if you look at, technology today versus even 5 years ago, it'll be so fascinating to see, okay, what are we going to focus on for the next 5 years? Because we're just going to see even more rapid advancement, right? So what is the next focus going to be? And definitely, as we said, right, the next meetings will be in Japan next year, hosted by the Japanese regulators, which will be very exciting. So course, if anyone has any questions about IMDRF or would like to talk to us about our experiences, feel free to reach out. We'd love to talk to you. And again, please check out all of the information that they've made publicly available. It's a wealth of resources in terms of, what you need to be doing to move products forward. So thank you so much for joining, Christine. Great discussion.
Good to see you, Clarissa.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.